that, we will open up, I'll call the working board meeting to order. Can we do a roll call? Or do we need to do a roll call? Yeah. Here.
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 Okay, if we can have the motion for our action item, and then we'll discuss it. Joey, you've got the...
I move that the Board of Education adopt the literary and science curricular resources as presented.
Second?
I second.
Okay, Stacy, can you please...
So I think just based on agenda order, if we could talk about the engineering units first. And Mitsuo is here prepared to kind of share some background on the engineering units, the process that we've taken to review materials, pilot materials, and come to you with this recommendation.
Okay, great.
Good evening, everyone. So I request that the board's approval to support the adoption of the engineering curriculum materials to be implemented in school year 17-18 for grades 4 and 5. So in 2014, ISB adopted the Next Generation Science Standards. One of the key changes is the inclusion of the engineering design standards within the NGSS. So what the engineering design standards really focus on is the practices engineers do in solving problems.
Matsuo, can you put the microphone closer, please? Thank you. Excuse me.
So some of the key steps that this includes is defining problems with criteria for success and also constraints as well in the design process. Designing solutions, which include prototyping, testing, and evaluating them. And then optimizing design, iterative redesign and testing. In school year 15-16, the K-5 science curriculum was reduced from 3 science units to 2 science units to help prepare for the NGSS. So we evaluated our current scope and sequence in alignment with NGSS and with the goal of replacing units with NGSS aligned units. This year, we conducted an engineering unit pilot at grades 4 and 5. Really to help identify, kind of now that we have this gap, to identify a unit that we could put back in to the science curriculum for 4th and 5th grade. So this year we piloted 2 different engineering curriculum. One is the Hand to Mine, which is developed and field tested in partnership with Texas A&M University and Purdue University, and is currently used in District 69. The other is Engineering is Elementary, which is developed by the Museum of Science in Boston, and we've actually had experience using this curriculum within District 65 in the past. Some teachers at Rice currently use it, as well as our newcomers over the summer used a portion of the Engineering is Elementary curriculum and had a really good experience with that. So those were the 2 that we chose to pilot this year. So we targeted at the 4th and 5th grade. In 4th grade, we focused on solar energy. So with the Hand to Mine unit, we had a solar house challenge, and with the EIE unit, we worked on designing solar ovens. At the 5th grade, our focus was on water. So with the Hand to Mine unit, students focused on a rainwater runoff design challenge, and with the EIE, they designed water filters. We have a list of schools that participated in the pilot, and some teachers from both schools, some teachers from schools actually piloted both curriculums. So we got some really good data from those classrooms. I want to kind of go through the criteria that we used to evaluate the pilot. So our key piece that we used for evaluation was really the alignment and the embedded science and engineering shifts of the Next Generation Science Standards. So our question was, how well did the curriculum really support those practices? Right, we really wanted to focus on designing solutions that gave students the opportunity to iterate, redesign, and testing solutions. So that's really important in the engineering practices. We also wanted to make sure that they were engaging students in authentic practices of science and engineering, as well as providing opportunities to justify and clarify their results through written and oral presentation. Other criteria that we looked at included explicitly really focusing on the diversity of learners that our district has and the ability for the curriculum to really support all learners in the district. as well as teachers' ability to learn and implement the materials. Like if teachers needed an extensive professional development, that was something that we wanted to record because we wanted to make sure that we could effectively implement it across the district. The other piece was the flexibility of the material to connect across content areas. So our pilot teachers work collaboratively within their grade level pilot groups. They receive professional development to teach the units, and they engage in various surveys throughout the implementation. So these are some of the results from our surveys. So one was, how well do you think the unit supports students in designing solutions to problems, really focusing on the iterative design practice. 86% of the pilot teachers really strongly supported the EIE curriculum in this regard. The other question we focused on was student engagement in the meaningful materials that reflect the practices of science and engineering. Here, 86% of the pilot teachers strongly supported the EIE curriculum. Some of the feedback they received was its ability to connect to other content areas. So the solar oven unit was really set in Botswana, where kind of the content that the students were provided was that it's difficult to get firewood on a regular sustainable basis as their cooking fuel. And so they were trying to investigate alternative means and really focusing on capturing solar energy for that. And the water filter design is set in India on the Ganges River and talking about the cleanliness of the river and how we could clean the river. And so teachers really like that aspect of how it really connected beyond just kind of engineering design. Another criteria that we looked at was really providing opportunities for students to clarify and justify their findings through orally and written form. Here, 57% of pilot teachers strongly supported the EIE, but overall, when we looked at strongly support and support, 100% of the teachers supported the EIE versus the hand-to-mind. Here's some other comments from pilot teachers. Overall, they recommended the adoption of the engineering as elementary curriculum based upon their experience. In addition to finding the resources extremely useful and the engagement level, they also liked the student-friendly rubrics that were provided as well. This really helped students as they went through their redesign process, which built on their previous results. So again, really supporting that iterative design process. The engineering as elementary materials also built better background knowledge of their students, which really helped them engage in the design process as well. We reached out to other groups, so we reached out to the Science Standing Committee and got their support in the adoption of the engineering as elementary curriculum, as well as the Curriculum Advisory Committee, so the CAT committee as well, and they supported the engineering as elementary curriculum adoption. So today, we'd like to recommend the adoption of the engineering as elementary curriculum for one unit of study for grades 4 and 5, starting next year. This serves as a replacement for the FOSS unit that was removed from the science curriculum. We will use general funds from this fiscal year to purchase the materials, and the approximate cost is about $37,000. Questions?
Can I add one more piece? And it's actually important to, if you will vote this in, to move forward on this so we can actually get materials to our educators before the end of this school year.
Correct.
Questions, comments? Joey?
What's the long-term vision for the relationship between, you mentioned cross-content relationships and ties. What's the long-term vision for how the EIE will tie in with mathematics and, aside from just the social studies links that are embedded within the story of the problem?
I think long term, I think the goal is really to develop our students to be innovators and problem solvers, really looking at the community and problems within the community and to be able to solve them. I think the community can be scaffolded. So community could represent our classroom, as small as our classroom and as wide as the world, right? And this is really what we want to develop in our students, the ability to solve the pressing issues that we know society is going to face. I think that the EIE curriculum really provides a start to kind of creating that mindset that we want to instill in our students. We are seeing connections with the math standards and the science standards, which I think is a great start. And so we went through the curriculum, the units that we could potentially pilot, and really aligned it with, okay, here's what the kids would know in their math class at this point in time. And we want to continue doing that, really aligning the math and science together. In addition, through kind of the interdisciplinary work, I think there are many places where we can connect with, particularly with social studies from a social conscious point of view and beyond. And I hope that we continue to push that envelope and integrate it.
Thank you.
What kind of supports are teachers going to get in order to be able to implement? So let's say we approve it today and they get these the curriculum in their hands. So what's the plan in regards to getting them ready to implement in fall?
Great question. So for the pilot, we had 2 days of professional development. We actually partnered with the University of Chicago for the Engineering as Elementary curriculum. And so they came out and worked with our teachers on 2 half days. The first half day to kind of really get exposure to the curriculum and be able to start teaching the unit. And then the second half day was a follow-up. Based on your experience so far, what have you learned? And then here's some follow-up PD. We want to copy that similar process for next year for our 4th and 5th grade teachers. So kind of a 2 professional development session, and continue to partner with the University of Chicago.
And then don't we have a partnership also with Northwestern around some STEM stuff? So how do we incorporate or integrate some of that partnership? Right, because I think, am I right? I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah. So I think overall, our goal is really to help instill the practices of science and engineering in all of our students. And we truly believe kind of this iterative process of problem solving. And so I think from that aspect, we definitely align the University of Chicago and the EIE curriculum, as well as the work we've been doing with Northwestern University. We are, on a side note, we are working with Northwestern to also help develop continued professional development for our science teachers to learn more about the next generation science standards. And I think this is where they all connect.
And I know this is focused on 4th and 5th, and has any thought been given in regards to pre-K to, the science curriculum in the lower grades in the primary grade?
Yep. Our focus this year was on 4th and 5th grade because of the new literacy curriculum at the K through 3 band. Moving forward, we'd like to pilot an engineering unit, a unit in the K through 3 band to kind of really build up that capacity, and then the following year incorporate an engineering unit K through 3. So again, adding the FOSS unit that we took out into the whole K through 5 science curriculum.
Thank you.
One more question for you. As you were describing it, you talked about how EIE is, and Hint to Mind, it gives students an opportunity to be iterative and see a problem and work through varieties of solutions, which means that there's a constraint, and then there's this vast openness where they can go find their path. Do you see a problem with how that meshes with other curriculum resources that might be more contained in a specific resource, where that might be so open-ended and build capacity and excitement around some type of learning that might cause problems in other areas?
I think regardless of problems, when we solve them, there are constraints. And I think it's great for our students to understand that they have to weigh these constraints together to ultimately come up with a variety of solutions. I think it also reinforces that there isn't one specific solution. And so I believe that that really helps develop our students in the long run.
And this could be an opportunity for me to learn, but when we were talking about adding the 5th planning period, there was the coding that we were going to be adding to the curriculum. I'm wondering how that coding curriculum might interact with this engineering curriculum.
Oh, great question. So we just actually, a member on our team reached out to District 69 to kind of brainstorm and tease out, learn more about what they're doing. They've actually created some coding units that align with engineering units that they're doing. And so, for example, if we are designing a solar oven, we could potentially create a coding project that measures and looks for kind of the optimal input of solar waves, or maybe the angle of the sun, or maybe we could create a robot that actually twists our oven around to maximize the amount of sun that it gets. So I think it's us really continuing to push the envelope to integrate all of our content areas together.
I have a quick question. So I think when the FOSS unit was removed and I don't know if this is across all schools, but I certainly know where my kids were, it reduced the amount of instruction time in science because they didn't have the number of units, and it did shift the amount of time that was spent in science for the course of the year. So is that going to go back to where it was, and did that affect all schools uniformly? I'm just wondering how it's going to affect the schedule, basically.
I hope that this really puts the emphasis back on the science, particularly with the professional development. I know that with our pilot teachers, after doing the pilot, they've started to ask for more science, right? They want to find more ways to integrate science into their curriculum, into daily activities, including like quick kind of STEM activities that they could use throughout the school year. So I hope that this continues to inspire our teachers to want to do more science in the classroom.
It doesn't require a shift in the instructional minutes that are outlined. But what it does do is it puts back in purposeful, aligned curriculum. And the 4th and 5th grade teachers have said they are welcoming of that unit, and they're excited to get something that they can run with. In some cases, teachers have extended units. In some cases, schools have, teachers have done their own mini units. In some cases, they've foregone part of the science instruction in favor of other things. The time is still there, and we're going to put that unit back in to make sure that that happens. And teachers are, again, excited for that opportunity, and we've gotten a lot of really great support.
So in places where maybe it did reduce the amount of time, it should go back. In other places,
That's correct.
they may have just altered it and used it for other things.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
And what's the current science curriculum in 6th, 7th, and 8th? I'm not clear on that.
We use the Pearson Interactive Science in grades 6, 7, and 8.
All right. And have you guys thought about, how is that going to align to that? So these proposed units or the curriculum, how that's going to align to and kind of build off of what's currently, or how does it build up to?
For next year, we are evaluating our science curriculum in general. Part of our plan is to provide professional development to our middle school teachers around the next generation science standards. There's a couple of units that they could potentially pilot. We are starting a professional development leader group, so a group of science leaders within our district that are going to get training over the summer with Northwestern to continue to revise and evaluate our curriculum, particularly at the middle school.
I just have one quick clarifying question. So the pilot teachers obviously approved this pretty overwhelmingly, it sounds like. And then you said it went through the Science Standing Committee, and that includes teachers from all schools, not just the pilot schools, correct?
Correct.
And then it went through CAC?
Correct.
Okay, great. And I do just want to take a moment to just note here that we see items 2 times before we approve them. This time, because of some timing issues with getting the pilot results and having the time to get it through CAC for the approval process, in order, like Dr. Gorin said, to get the materials in time to be able to implement them for use next year, we're not going to get that second review. So I think it's important to find out what review process it did go through before it got to us here.
And we really appreciate the consideration and the willing to support the request, on a single read, and to consider the request on a single read.
Are there any other questions about the science unit?
I just have a question, and also this is for my own learning. So I know that there's this consideration of how to roll this out for younger, for 3rd grade and below later. But what currently is being used for 3rd grade and below for science?
So we use the FOSS curriculum.
FOSS
Correct.
still, okay.
Yep.
So ultimately, when we do, we'll do the same thing where we remove a FOSS unit from the lower grades and.
It's already pilot.
It's already
It's already
been
been
removed,
removed
yes.
from
So
the- oh,
we will add back
Oh,
a
so
unit.
all removed from all the grade levels?
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have a timeline for when we think we're gonna
So
start piloting?
We would
for-
pilot next year, the specific engineering unit that would be implemented, and then the following year, we would ask for adoption of that unit. And at the same time, we'll be reviewing the FOSS units as well for their NGSS alignment, and potentially piloting a new science curriculum to replace the existing FOSS units that
Do we
we.
think, well, does this engineering, does this unit, does it have, like, do we think that we would be able to use it in the lower grades so we can have some continuity, or are we anticipating?
Yep, they provide units from K through 5 as well as out-of-school opportunities and units.
Right? Anything else on the science? Okay, so if you want to go ahead and discuss the literacy.
All right, so thank you for the opportunity again to put this forward to you for consideration. What I'm coming forward to ask for tonight on the literacy side is for adoption of the Teachers College Units of Study for Teaching Reading in kindergarten and first grade. Last year we came and sought approval to purchase the units from the same publisher for second and third grade. This backs us into kindergarten and first grade with this purchase ideally. Just kind of a couple important, couple facts to run through as far as this adoption. We see this as being very important because, one, it does support purposeful and collaborative teaching. These units of study can create very focused core classroom instruction in the form of mini lessons. So on a daily basis, kids are encountering very focused literacy instruction for about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, balanced on foundational skills, early reading skills. These lessons are very much about how readers become readers and do the work of reading themselves. We have a wonderful complement curriculum, Making Meaning, that's an interactive read-aloud curriculum, where students begin to do more of the thinking of reading. This curriculum is really focused on getting students to really break apart words, begin to understand text, and basically increase their reading independence. We think it's incredibly important to have students engaged in their reading, to be doing the work of reading, to be struggling with complex text, and to be getting the necessary support from teachers in the form of this instruction. As you noted, well, actually we have some new folks, but last year we put forward a literacy framework that said literacy instruction in District 65, kindergarten through third grade, should have 3 workshops. It should have language workshop, reading workshop, and writing workshop. Language workshop is focused on students beginning to both get deeper on the spoken word as well as the written word, understanding how to break apart words, understand word parts, initial phonemic awareness and the foundational skills, as well as speaking and listening. Reading workshop, which is where this curriculum adoption is focused, is very much on helping students begin to put together the early understanding of words into their own independent reading and making sense of text. And then turning around and being able to write and speak about that understanding in a meaningful way. And then the final piece is writing workshop, and we're fortunate in District 65 that there was a significant investment of time and resources in developing writing workshop curriculum. It's a pretty strong element of our literacy instruction, and so we're continuing to run with the district units. This year, in order to really focus on how to address core instruction and reading workshop, we had 18 teachers take on piloting the units of study for teaching reading in kindergarten and first grade. These teachers represented Title I schools, non-Title I schools, TWE teachers, non-TWE teachers, represented a very nice diversity of district throughout the district for us. They came together. We had a teacher leader for our kindergarten group and our first grade group. They came together on our district half days as well as sometimes after school in order to kind of lead and facilitate the pilot. We provided some professional learning through the form of Chicago Literacy Group, who's done some work with us in second and third grade. And then we kept pretty regular touch with these folks, including dropping into classrooms in order to get a sense of how this pilot was going. The group really came back feeling very, very positive about the adoption itself. You can't quite read that slide, but when we pulled them together in February, we had 6 criteria that we were looking for. Particularly, we were looking for, did the curricular materials support an area of need in the literacy framework? So we've committed to teaching literacy in a particular way. We really focused on language workshop in kindergarten and first grade this year while this group was piloting, and we added some resources last year to focus on language workshop. Writing workshop we thought was in a good place. Reading workshop really needed this core focused instruction. Our pilot teachers started to tell us this is the piece that we were missing. They said, we feel like this core instruction is the piece that we are missing because it's establishing core language, it's establishing some core learning throughout our classrooms that then we can touch into in guided reading. We can touch into when we're conferring with kids, but it's creating a shared experience and a shared language in our classroom that is improving our students' enthusiasm for reading, our student achievement, and the way that kids are navigating texts. So does it address an area of need in the literacy framework? Does it support the Common Core curricular shifts? Does it provide resources and strategy to meet the needs for the diversity of learners in District 65? And for us, that's a pretty intentional term because that is students with IEPs, that's second language learners, it's students that are growing either, that are striving to get to grade level or above grade level. So does the curriculum have a flexibility to address the needs of learners in our district? Additionally, do the materials provide adequate support for educators to pick them up and teach from them? Our educators, particularly in K-5, teach a lot of different subjects in a day. They have to wear a lot of different hats. So are we able to pick them up, make some sense of them, and really make good instructional decisions? This program does require a lift from educators, but what we've learned from second and third grade teachers this year is that the time is a worthwhile investment and people are really seeing the payback in regards to the work with their kids, and that there's a lot of professional learning in the texts themselves. And if we scaffold professional learning in ways that allows educators to unpack the units and do that collaboratively in groups, that they are able to kind of get that lift that they need in using the materials. So we've thought specifically about how we continue to support the work in rolling these units out. We also want to make sure there are opportunities to connect across the content areas. And some of the questioning back and forth with Mitsuo, we are focused right now in literacy in defining these 3 workshops and really helping build educator expertise. But in time, in very near time, we want to start looking across the instructional day and more intentionally drawing those connections between the reading and writing block and the rest of the day, so that teachers can see how the day comes together and students can see how the day comes together in a way that makes sense for a lot of people. And then lastly, we want to see that these materials have impacted student learning in a positive manner, and the feedback from all of our pilot teachers has been extremely strong in this area. The next slide, again, not very readable, does talk about some of the things we learned from our pilot teachers. Specifically, they talked about the fact that they found the materials extremely engaging. The kids really get excited in the work. They really dive into the work that they need to do. Teachers enjoyed some of the instructional decision making that the materials put in front of them. When they take a look at the lessons, there's a mini lesson, but then there's a mid-lesson teaching point they can pick up. There are also supports for conferring or one-to-one teaching with kids. And it allows teachers to step back and say, what do my kids need right now? The other thing we did is we started to build the curricular calendars with some extra days built in, so that if a lesson doesn't necessarily go the way we want it to go today, or we realize that the class didn't kind of come out of that with the basic understanding we wanted, we can go back in the next day and make those instructional decisions and meet the needs of kids. So we're balancing the materials with the pacing and some of the supports in a way that we really think is working for teachers, and our pilot teachers really kind of concurred that this provides the resources they need to do that. Teachers did say that one of the challenges is, rather than buying a big program, we're trying to put together the best materials to create a literacy block. So they have said there's a lot going on, and how can we sit down and kind of try to simplify things and make sure that we understand the connections within the literacy block. We have one of the proposals that we put forward for summer work has some of those very teachers coming together to create some of the support materials and make those connections, as well as to say, what is the right timing for the right lifts of things in kindergarten and first grade, to ensure that, essentially that the materials are hitting kids when they need them to support all the range of learners that we have. And then, the last box here is what are we doing to overcome these challenges? We have the summer curriculum work that we really we're deeply invested in. We learned a lot last summer. We did a lot of curriculum work for 2-3, and we're going to repeat a lot of those things in order to set this up for this coming year. The additional thing that we pay attention to, which is covered a little bit in, I'll get back to that slide, this slide, is we're paying a lot of attention to the professional learning that goes with this. We will use our 4 district half-days to support our kindergarten and first grade educators in learning to implement these units. We also would like to offer a 2-day session in June and a 2-day session in August for our educators. And again, this is parallel to something we did last year with our 2nd and 3rd grade teachers, and we had about 75% attendance from our teachers, which is outstanding. And that gives them that introduction to the units, and that is also why we're so interested in getting the units in teachers' hands before they leave, because they can come with the units, dig in, and they literally begin to think about what's the first 20 days, and how do I unpack this first unit for success. Additionally, we have coaches that are committed, the same coaches that have been coaching in kindergarten and first grade this year will continue in those same grade bands, but shift their focus to the implementation of these materials. So we have the benefit of 2 coaches who've been working and building relationships with our kindergarten and first grade educators this year with the language workshop that can shift and move into coaching this next year. We also have the opportunity to connect them to some professional development with Teachers College to support their learning and abilities in coaching this. So, what's that? Yep, thank you, Joey, I appreciate it. There we go. So, long story short on this one, the support from our pilot teachers was overwhelmingly yes. They said, please, please, please adopt this. We started to get into a conversation about number of units and things along those lines, and a couple of our pilot teachers came back and said, actually, I think the turning question with the pilot teachers was, someone said, well, what would we teach next year if we don't do this? And one of the teachers said, I don't want to teach anything but with this. And they are, at that point, they're all like, wait, we want in, and we want to see this in our district, and we think this is the right thing. We did proceed, after the pilot teachers said, yes, we want to move forward with this. We took it to the ELA Standing Committee, received support there, and did take it to CAC and received support there. So with that, and Joey, I'm going to get myself in trouble again. I'm asking for your support in our recommendation to purchase these materials for our reading workshop. It is essentially we're purchasing 64 units per grade level. That provides one for each of our educators, as well as a set for special education at each school, and we can connect to the reading specialists and principals with that purchase as well. We also have been working to enhance classroom libraries and continue to do that. There is one more purchase of books that's coming in this year to strengthen classroom libraries, and we hope to be able to do something similar early next year. Because one of the key things about this curriculum is that kids are picking up texts that are at their independent instructional reading levels, and so there needs to be a high volume of text, particularly in kindergarten and first grade. All right, questions?
Do the materials in this adoption come with all the varied text levels that teachers would require for a successful reading workshop?
So this actual adoption comes with the teacher's kit and then their mentor texts for teaching the units. It does not come with any of the student books, and that's why we've been working on purchasing books to strengthen our classroom libraries. We do believe with this next purchase coming in, we're going to be in a pretty good place. We can always benefit from putting more books in the classrooms. But we're really trying to be intentional about, with our purchases, making sure that we have texts that represent the range of cultures and students that we work with, as well as books that are aligned to the units that the teachers will be teaching.
So maybe.
So getting there. Yeah. So there are definitely enough books to lift and go, but we will continue over the next couple of years to strengthen classroom
As
libraries.
K1, they go through those books pretty fast.
They go through the books very quickly. Yeah.
Can you give me a little bit more detail in regards to, what some of the challenging aspects, right? Was the currently trying to squeeze too much into the K-Day. Now, again, being a huge early childhood advocate, I know that, again, kids at that age developmentally need to be playing, right? You learn and you play. Like, what components in this particular curriculum actually speak to the developmental needs of kids in kindergarten?
So the curriculum itself is based in, as I've said, very focused mini lessons. So kids gather in the carpet, very focused mini lesson, shouldn't go any longer than 15 minutes. Most should be about 10 minutes. So it's very focused content. The lesson tends to have a narrative structure to it in the sense that there's a connection there's a teaching point. That teaching point actually gets repeated 4 or 5 different times as they're kind of walking through both the modeling and then students' opportunity to kind of interact with that learning. Students are then released to then read, and they start initially in what they kind of refer to as private reading or independent reading for, again, we start at the beginning of the year in very short increments of time before they move into their buddy reading. So they get an opportunity to kind of have a dose of instruction that's focused in a very kind of short window of time, then practice it independently, and then practice it with a partner. And as we transition from that independent to buddy reading, that's also that moment where the teacher generally inserts that next piece of, kind of next, it's either a review of that mini lesson or the next little learning push that we want to put in place for kids. So there's an opportunity for discourse, there's an opportunity to buddy up, there's an opportunity to get very focused instruction in a short increment that they get to practice quickly.
In regards to addressing some of the issues with bilingual learners and two-way immersion, the TWE program, what are some of your thoughts in regards to aligning some of this with some of the WIDA language standards, right? Because I think, it's the best practice is always that, when you're working with English learners, you have to have a language action plan. Mm-hmm. And I mean, is that something that's part of how you're going to address whatever shortages or things that lack, that really address the needs of English learners in our district?
Yeah, so what we need to do, so there are a couple things we're doing short-term and long-term. In regards to TWE classrooms and second language learners, we're really trying to look at the full block and the full literacy block and determine what is the right language allocation and what are the right aspects that should be taught in English and Spanish. And Lauren Leitao and Elizabeth Cardenas Lopez have been looking at that and continuing to tune and refine that with that type of information in their mind. When we did speak with TWE teachers that piloted, what they said they felt like their appropriate summer accommodation and summer work would be for us to take, there's a chart on the inside of each one of these units that outlines every lesson, the key learning objectives, as well as the mid-lesson teaching point and possible conferring points. And their recommendation to support TWE teachers was for us to take that and really kind of revise it using with TWE teachers to say which lessons maybe are not necessarily applicable and how do we revise that based upon the needs of Spanish language learners. And so that's one of the things that we're working on taking on. And I think we'll make pretty good progress on it this year in partnership with some TWE teachers, but that'll be an ongoing process. So we're trying to do it in partnership.
I'm just wondering for kindergarten, how much of a shift this is, and maybe my information is somewhat dated because I now have the youngest being a 5th grader, but it used to be that reading workshop didn't really start in kindergarten until mid-year. I mean, it was almost all read aloud until then, and there wasn't any individual or work. So has that shift happened over time, or will that shift be happening with this introduction, in which case it's a pretty sizable shift for kindergarten? I'm just wondering how that is, what's the from to?
So there are a couple pieces of this. In talking to the pilot teachers, what they saw was that there were specific lessons and specific things that are being taught earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I want to be clear about, like the second unit that they teach is called Reading Superpowers. And Reading Superpowers really gets into, I've picked up a book, I can't quite figure out, I'm stuck, and what are the powers that I have that I can use in order to begin to make sense of this book? It might be word power, it might be picture power, there are a bunch of different powers that kids can begin to rely on to make sense of books. And so again, I think kind of touching into your where does it is developmentally appropriate. Kindergartners digging into their superpowers is a happy place. And what the teachers have said to us is, these are things that we were working into guided reading groups, or in some cases not at all, or later in the year, and they've come to realize that it works well in this sequence and that they are creating this common language that is accelerating some of the growth of their readers. So it is earlier, but it is in a way that there's a mini lesson that we're launching and kids are beginning to develop these habits. We're moving kids into small groups, into stations. This gives them something else to do independently and to develop their reading, their beginning early literacy skills. The pilot teachers saw it as a shift, but probably not as big a shift as we put in place with them this year, which was starting Words Their Way in January. So because they've always been very focused on teaching reading, if anything, this puts something in their hands that creates more
structure around it.
consistency across our classrooms and across schools.
Well, it sounds great. I made me think too, as we've gone through now these presentations, to send a thanks to the teachers that are involved in these pilots, because it's no small feat to be able to take on this kind of content and, challenge. And so if you, if we could all extend that thank you.
In
'cause
both of our cases, we're extremely grateful for the teachers that took on the pilots. And I think, there was a question earlier about K-3 science. One of the things we're constantly trying to manage is the pace of change. And our teachers are taking on a lot of things, and we kind of like everything yesterday, and the right thing is to pace things out, and that way when we do get to them, teachers are with us and teachers are ready for that lift, because all of these do take time and energy, without a doubt.
I just had a quick question about I know you said there are some limitations in being able to get the libraries as robust as you wanted them to be. What is the timeline for folks having the libraries that they do need?
So the libraries are sufficient to lift the curriculum at this point. And one of the things that's, I think, a little bit challenging sometimes is that the libraries do vary classroom to classroom, school to school. And so we are working at a couple different levels. We're working at district level for district purchases. In some cases, we're working with principals, primarily in Title I schools, to work to strengthen libraries in certain places that we feel like really need to be strengthened. At this point, I don't have necessarily a projected long-term. Each time I kind of, I work on sweeping in any kind of additional funds that I can find, and not find, but any additional funds that I can create to put to strengthen classroom libraries. And each time we do that, people are incredibly appreciative. We also have had support from PTAs, as well as I said, using Title I dollars. So we're really trying to be intentional, and in each opportunity, try to make sure that we're investing in books that are representative and aligned with our units.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there I know that this is from the Teachers College, so they do trainings in New York.
Yep.
That are expensive, and you send people out of state, and that's odd in education. But I wonder if, from the pilot group of early adopters, if there's a value in training a couple of people who can be responsible for leading the charge here as you move this through the ranks over the years, because there's also a cost to the annual trainings of people coming on site, and if there's a benefit to investing in the human capital here for the long term.
Yeah, so thank you. So there are a couple, so we did send one person to Teachers College last summer. We did apply for, I think it was a total of 7 this year, including the 2 leads from our teacher leads from our pilot groups. We did not get everybody in, but I think we're sending a total of 5. And then additionally, we do work with a wonderful group, Chicago Literacy Group, and the pilot teachers have had an opportunity to interact with them on a couple different occasions this year in a small group space, and they've also done some large group work with our 2nd and 3rd grade teachers, and they really provide some excellent high quality professional learning for us as well. So we're working on kind of the capacity building through a couple different levers.
Can I just stress one thing? Stacy keeps using the word intentional, and I think it's a really important word, because this is about our literacy programming and being intentional at the earliest grades to build a robust system. And from building the system to building the libraries, it's just a really important step and steps to take to actually move forward on all of the goals that we have in the district. And the resounding yay that we get in both sets, so from Matsuo's work as well, is to the credit of the teachers who are really putting their time and effort in, and to the whole process to really be able to build this and to move forward. So thank you both for doing this as well.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. This all sounds really excellent and exciting, so thank you both for those presentations. If we don't have any other questions, can we take the vote, please?
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have our discussion item, the Q3 strategic plan update. Dr. Warren, Maria?
Sure. I'll just start for 2 seconds, which is to say the obvious, that on a quarterly basis, we come back to the board and to the public and report on our progress. And it's our commitment as a leadership team on behalf of the work that's being done in the district to be transparent about the work that we're doing in the strategic plan so that the strategic plan doesn't just sit on our shelves. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Maria Allison, who will help to lead the conversation tonight.
Sure, okay. We're actually going to kind of spin around the table and provide updates, but just as a little bit of context, because we do have new board members here, this document tonight is one of 3 parts for how we report out on our progress on the strat plan. This document is meant to share on a quarterly basis highlights of the work that's been done and progress as we've advanced against that work plan that we build at the beginning of each year, which is our sort of best case scenario for the milestones and objectives we hope to hit, but since that's done once a year way out in advance, especially as we get towards quarters 3 and quarters 4, you know, it makes a lot of sense to update where we are, how it actually played out. We also publish an outcomes scorecard in August, which gives the high-level district scorecard and some detail, and we also publish a strategy indicator scorecard in January, which gives more of a leading indicator set of metrics to look at our progress. We report our progress in each of the 5 core areas that the strat plan is based in. So teaching and learning, thriving workforce, safe and supportive climate, family and community engagement, and financial sustainability. We use a color key to code our progress in each area. We set a really high bar for ourselves on that. So you'll see this time we're at 4 yellows and 1 green. And what that means is to fall from green to yellow means one of the many things on the list that was meant to be done by this quarter didn't happen by the deadline at the end of the quarter, but everything is still on track for completion. Nothing is significantly behind track or needing to be changed. So really that Q3 to be in that kind of shape with what we've all had on our plates this year is actually pretty good progress, if you ask me. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to you guys who want to each do a flip through your section.
We'll share this microphone. Thanks, Maria. Thank you, Paul. I'll just speak to the first couple of bullets in the high quality teaching and learning and then pass to Stacy. This year, the curriculum and instructional team thinking about how to build capacity across the district really focused on the important role that instructional coaches play. Created this concept of having a coaching professional development for coaches on coaching. Our group is about 20 instructional coaches. We drew the circle wide to include as many folks that would fit that job description as possible. We had all of those coaches participated in what will be a 5-part. We've got one more left to go on the Friday before the Memorial Day, focused on building coaching attitudes and dispositions, reading an anchor text by Ellen Aguilar, and then working also on building a belief statement and starting towards, you've talked about the literacy framework, we've talked about the math framework, a coaching framework as well to guide our work in support of teachers. Supported by Joyce, 11 teachers from 8 schools participated in intensive year-long training focused on reading intervention strategies, primarily for students with IEPs. And we've initiated, implemented, and supported a new ESL program at Dawes this year. This was the first year of implementation with instructional specialists focused on English as a second language instruction. And we don't have yet academic outcome data, but certainly in terms of one of the main purposes of helping to maintain a more consistent enrollment at Walker, which was receiving all of our students needing ESL services from the south side of Evanston, that's certainly been helpful and supportive of the Walker school community. We don't have overcrowding in Walker classrooms in the spring as we have had for several years previously.
All right. Last couple points to report out on. We have spent significant time and energy this year working on development of MTSS support plans for our striving students. Specifically, we rolled out a tool this year that is the MTSS Explorer, which is where teachers essentially build these intervention plans and then monitor the intervention plans over time. We have implemented 3 different waves of training in order to support all educators in their understanding of the tool and their ability to use the tool. Our goal was to have 100% of the students below the 25th percentile without IEPs or EL, because they already have their own individual plans, to have plans in the Explorer at the end of the 3rd quarter. We have 83% of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders have plans, and 81% of our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders have plans. So we did come up short on that goal. We continue to work with the provider of the tool because we are still working through some issues and challenges with the tool, and we have actually some ongoing conversations with them about improvements we can make with the tool over the summer and continue to look at our process. So we really think that the feedback has been, training has been supportive, but we still need some work on refining the tool so that it's a more efficient tool for educators to use and to track these plans. The last bullet under our areas refers to STEM after school opportunities and mini opportunities. Mitsuo's team took a look at ways to expand our STEM programming beyond the instructional day and added VEX Robotics in the after-school space, as well as Page and Paxton in the after-school space. Those have both been received, and it's at each of our at about 2 to 3 schools. It's been received very positively, and we do hope as we kind of pull together end-of-year information on pilots, so that's something that we can continue in the Learning Plus space. And we really like the opportunities of seeding some of these opportunities out of school to see if, in fact, there are ways to expand that going forward. Similarly, the team has also looked in an effort to find ways to kind of infuse different STEM opportunities. They tried out a model for using a half day with a district teacher to do a kind of a mini invention convention, again, getting at engineering standards. And that was a very fun and positive, engaging experience for a group of Oakton students that we, again, need to continue to refine and see if there's a way to possibly use a similar model in some of our half-day spaces. So that's some of the work that we've been doing.
Do we want to take any questions on that part of the report before we move on to the next?
Question for Stacy. So previously in the MTSS plans, we've gone to 80%. Where were we before we started this initiative of the non-IEP students in the 25th percentile?
So really, this tool has allowed us to do a better job of data management, because prior the plans were generated in Google Docs or in Word documents, and so we didn't have a great mechanism for being able to track the percentage of plans. This is an improvement from where we were as we were beginning to lift this tool last year, but this is really the beginnings of a baseline for us.
So we're not sure where we were.
That's correct, because this is the first year with the tool. Go ahead.
Yeah, we just didn't, we didn't have a good way of knowing. That's one of the advantages of the move to this type of system.
Okay. So I guess that my other question was related to that, because I wasn't sure what the delta was. You know, what are the challenges to implementation? Because we've talked a lot about, you know, resource challenges from the teacher or the teams. Are you seeing capacity constraints that are happening with those plans that are implemented and not having enough resources to deliver them? Or are there any other learnings from this year about the implementation?
Yeah, the primary learning at this point is that the tool needs continued refinement. That is the piece that educators are speaking most loudly about, is that they see the benefits of having a centralized tool. They really like the visual aspects of having a graph that they're goal setting against and can see if kids are making the growth that they need, but that the process of getting the plans into the system still needs some refinement. That's been the primary push from educators for us, is that piece is still taking more time than they would like it, and that's really about the plan creation.
Yeah, not the plan efficacy.
At this point.
Yeah, okay, all right. So it'll be interesting to see that, you know, obviously the tool is step one.
I would just add that this tool will allow us to really carefully measure intervention efficacy over time, because as educators complete the plans and say which interventions they're using and with what frequency, then we can measure student progress over the course of the year and get some feedback about what interventions we're planning. I would say one other piece of feedback that we are getting is that teachers feel especially that there's fewer options for mathematics intervention and support. So it's one reason why ST Math has been able to step into that space as another idea, another possibility for mathematics intervention. That's an ongoing need that we have right now.
Thank you. Any other questions on this? We'll move on to the next area. Okay. So you're going to go next?
Safe and supportive school climate. So our work in safe and supportive schools has really this year, with the addition of our equity work, equity serves as sort of the frame around all of our work in terms of the safe and supportive school, and is embedded into what we're working on in the schools. So we have a number of different aspects about what makes our schools a place where we are figuring out the climate, figuring out the environment, and how our relationships impact each other and how to improve our work. In terms of restorative practices, we have eight or nine schools now that are trained in restorative circles. In kind of the simple circles are called sharing circles, which is all about relationship building. We also have started some work in terms of peace circles in some of the schools where we're really working to resolve some conflicts between children, and that happens within, largely within a classroom setting, although it may happen through the administrators in the building or social workers. PBIS is still established in all of our schools. This is our 17th year of doing PBIS in District 65. We were one of the first adopters of PBIS nationwide, and we have been a leader in our PBIS work. What we are trying to do at this point in time is to blend some of the PBIS work into both our restorative practices and kind of oversee it through the school climate team so that our system is less complicated and that we are addressing the needs of children through a variety of different ways. There can be a lot of tools that we use to work with kids in the school depending upon what children's needs are. And then we also have a number of social emotional learning programs that we use within our schools. We use Second Step, we use mindfulness, zones of regulation, Matt and Molly, Erica's Lighthouse. And I think that next year, as we develop our cell equity period from kindergarten through 5th, we're going to be utilizing many of those social emotional learning programs and restorative circles in order to really continue to enhance our relationship work. In terms of some of the equity training, and Corey Wallace will give a more defined description, when she does her report in the next month or so, or a few weeks. We have been doing Beyond Diversity, and we've trained probably about, over about 150 people at this point in time. Our game plan is to train all 1,400 staff by June of 2019. So that's been one piece that we've been doing, but we've also been doing seed groups this year, and we have 2 seed groups, which include administrators and staff. In the district. Next year, we're hoping to have maybe 6 to 8 seed groups. And we'd also like to have a parent seed group that we establish. In terms of early childhood work, we're always trying to figure out how to well transition children to kindergarten. One of the things we did this year, which was different, was we had a panel to help parents become more informed, and so they could learn from other parents with students of IEPs to kind of understand the transition process and how an IEP might change or look like within a kindergarten setting as opposed to what it looks like here in early childhood. They also presented this to other early childhood coordinators in the area so that they would get some information about this as well. Corey Wallace has completed all the equity walks in the schools, and she's completing a report on her findings. And we're really hoping that her work will help us in terms of identifying some of the professional development that we want to do, as well as being information that we will funnel into our school climate team so that individual school climate teams will be able to use that input in terms of looking at goals or as they develop action plans in terms of the work that they're doing. The research, accountability and data, RAD, had done some data reports for all of our schools that we have doing school climate right now. So we have 6 school climate teams in what we call cohort 1. That was our first group that we rolled out over a year ago. And that was in the area of really relationships, where we're looking at relationships between staff, relationships between staff and students, relationships between staff and family, and staff to student, staff to family, staff to staff, student to staff, that was it. And so the teams were trained specifically in terms of relationships, and Biz Lindsay Ryan worked with our teams regarding that. They sat and really took a look at the data that was provided through surveys that staff completed to be able to analyze relationships within their buildings. And using that data, they developed action plans and then implementation plans for areas that they wanted to make some changes. That's really what happens in the first stage of the school climate teams. We realized we initially planned for school climate teams to work on each area for 1 year, but we realized it wasn't enough time for them to do all the work that they needed to do, as well as to roll this out to their fellow staff people. So we've increased that period to a year and a half. And at that point in time, we train the next set of schools, next 6 schools, in the area of safety. And this is really looking at both emotional safety as well as physical safety within the buildings. So they may be looking at ODRs, they may be looking at different kinds of relationships that people have with each other and where people feel comfortable or not. So that's been really an interesting piece. It certainly dovetails with all of our work related to equity and thinking about relationships with all people. Next year, our last 6 schools will be starting also in the school climate team. The next thing is our district equity policy was presented to the policy committee in February and is currently under revision for review at the next policy meeting. And the whole Child Council merged with the district equity leadership team. We chose to do this. Whole Child Council was initially developed in order to oversee the work of the school climate team, but as we went forward with the school climate team, we realized that we really wanted this equity leadership team to be the group. It seemed far more appropriate to be the group that was overseeing all of the school climate work so that we could funnel that into the adult. So we now have also an advisory group of parents and community members who are sitting on in sort of an advisory basis to the district equity leadership team, and we last met on March 17th, I believe. Okay, that's me.
All right, so can we get questions, comments for Joyce? Joey?
So, under safe and supportive school climate, yeah, I mean, you talked about a lot of things: restorative justice circles, PBIS, second step, zones of regulation, Erica's Lighthouse. So all of these are intended to give students voice and opportunity to, process, calm down, have strategies and skills to maneuver the social network of school. Are you seeing a is the decrease in the number of suspensions and detentions in line with what you would expect, given all those things that are at play in the schools, or is it not decreasing fast enough? Or how would you say your expectations are aligned to that?
You know, I think we use social emotional learning programs for a variety of reasons. Some of them were required by school code. So Aaron's Law, for instance, is a anti-touch program, you know, a no-touch program. So that's required for us to be offering. As well as Erica's Lighthouse is a program that we use for students for suicide prevention and awareness. We're also required to do anti-bullying programs, which we do in a variety of grades within the school. Social workers, psychologists, classroom teachers use a variety of different tools in terms of social emotional learning. Many teachers really like Second Step because it emphasizes anger management, problem solving, and empathy training. I know that we have one school that adopted it throughout all the grades this past year, and I feel like there has been a big impact in terms of behavioral incidences that happen in the school, and all the staff are talking the same language with kids, which I think is really important. The restorative circles, you know, for those of you who have children who are in those schools, teachers talk a lot about the restorative circles. It has become a very new way for us right this second, but the relationship building piece in terms of children being able to really be heard and have their voice in that setting in their class, where every child gets an opportunity, you know, through using this talking piece has really been something that we are excited about and see a lot of possibilities in terms of peace circles and doing what we call restorative conferences so that we can address conflicts more quickly.
I think I
guess maybe I asked the question wrong. These are all intended to allow students to mitigate differences.
Correct.
And students who often show behavior that results in detention and suspension, which are punitive and exclusionary, are communicating a difference in those moments. And I'm wondering if there's an expectation aligned to these programs and to this initiative that's intending to lessen that number, because there's still how many students a year that have been suspended from school to try to...
Yeah, I think the answer to your question is yes. And I think in schools that have fired on all cylinders, if you will, of engaged in the school climate work, set a school-wide goal, and then in at least 2 cases where the principal has set their student learning objective, their SLO, around decreasing ODRs and decreasing the racial predictability of ODRs, specifically Walker and Willard, we've seen transformative changes in ODR numbers and also in percentages of ODRs that are given to students of color. So we expect those same types of changes and transformational change to occur across the district as more and more schools are able to combine initiatives, all of this, the school climate work, all the social emotional learning work, all of the instructional support, goal setting, school improvement planning work that Maria Allison is helping us with. And when we see those things coming together, we've really seen some very positive results. The middle schools have not yet started. Well, Haven started this year, is in year 1 of the school climate work. Chute and Nichols are to follow. Those account for the vast majority of our suspensions, our 3 middle schools. So we're not going to see a significant decrease in suspensions in our elementary schools because there are very, very few suspensions in our 10 elementary schools. So again, really looking more at ODRs, and the racial predictability of ODRs is where a couple of our schools have found a lot of success.
Joey, just to expand on that, because when we'll see in August, we did develop progress indicators at the strategic strat plan level that looks at both. Well, we have outcome indicators around suspensions, but also ODRs. So there's certainly an intent and a connection between the two and these programs to attain that, as well as other benefits, right, beyond, just for all children.
Yeah, I was just curious as to organizationally if a principal can create an SLO targeting something like that. It's something, right?
that's what's going on.
It it's a behavioral change to respond to something differently. At what point does the autonomy to choose that come away, and does that become the organizational norm or the organizational expectation?
We'll learn a lot from the data when we get them in. I think also just a little bit of context. Couple key points. A couple of years ago, actually before I landed, the board at that time set a very aggressive set of goals around suspensions. And it preceded the state law. And so the District 65 and this board was way out ahead of the game. Fast forward to about a year in, John and Joyce did a spectacular presentation around this body, which I'll always remember as ABC, the antecedents behavior consequences. And part of this is the driving conceptual framework that we're really trying to push, because we spend too much time on consequences and not really looking at the antecedents. And then with that comes the leadership, again, that Joyce and John and the rest of the team have around the climate teams, around the restorative justice piece, to be able to create a broad organizational culture around this that then we have to implement and be even more aggressive in implementing and in building buy-in. So I think that driving conceptual framework is, stakes are in the ground, and what we're looking for is to look at the data and see where we're making progress. And you pose a really interesting question of when does this become something that is more required rather than voluntary, and I think that's something we'll look at when we see some of the data from the schools that are actually intentional in this way.
Thank you.
Are there other questions on this?
I'm really happy to see that there's a staff panel for parents whose children have IEPs in the JEH, right, and teaching them about those transitions. I think that's great. So I think that's something that we got to continue as a district in regards to ensuring that our kids, and particularly our most marginalized kids and families, have access or have the ability to or are given the opportunity to get the information they need in order to plan ahead, right? In regards to JH staff communicating with parents, and other aspects, right, and other things, and also, what I see here is, again, that you've communicated with local early childhood programs. Is that correct, or?
Right, there's a group of early childhood directors that meet here on a monthly basis to review, concerns and address changes together. In terms of connections with parents, we have two community engagement faculty or staff here in JEH, one for the 3 to 5 population, and then we have our home visitors, and also a family and community engagement person there in the 0 to 3 population who do outreach workshops, GED programs, all sorts of events together. And in JEH, we do a different kind of disciplinary program. We do conscious discipline with those students.
A couple questions. One was, in terms of the equity walks, Joyce, in here it talks about the looking at the impacts then for the climate team and professional development, but I just want to make sure, we've also talked about, and we'll see it when we see it, those equity walks ultimately culminating in a set of areas that we need to look at for policy and process more, across the board.
Right.
Is that accurate? I just want to make sure my expectations are.
That's right.
Okay.
That's what we're looking for.
It just wasn't mentioned
across
here,
the board, but also, we're really looking for what might be recommendations for individual schools in terms of things that they might be wanting to look at.
Yeah, no, I knew that. I just didn't know if I was wrong. So both and.
Right.
Okay. And then the only other question I had, well, I guess this is some feedback that I gotten from a couple of the liaison schools is going forward, or at some point, and we have been doing it throughout, but having some communication around the climate teamwork and just to clarify, scope, structure, plans in the broader school communities in which they're operating, because I do think it's a new concept, and some have done really well, and others, maybe the larger community isn't really understanding what's the purpose of this and how is this rolling out. And so I don't know if I've only heard that from a couple of liaison schools, whether that's something that you guys want to work on, or is that an outlier?
Is that in terms of parents?
I would say both internal and external stakeholders, staff some, but this is more directly parents. Because we have, as you said, we've got lots of work going on, and and as you see the equity work and these coming together, and then just understanding, what's the purpose of it, and how does it relate to my set of children or staff at large. I would say more parents, though.
I think this is something that we've tried to figure out too. In the beginning, really, the school climate teams have to spend time together to think about their environment and their culture and what they want to be making some changes on. So it's a group of maybe 7 or 8 people who then roll out a lot of their thinking to the rest of the staff. So that takes some time. We are at the point, though, that we realize that we have to have better communication with what's going on in each of the schools. And so I think we want to start having some parent liaisons with some school climate liaisons so that they can begin to communicate together, and how parents can support the work of the school climate team. Every school climate team is going to have a little bit something different that they're working on, depending upon what their school's needs are and what they're assessed and where they are. But, I would hope that school climate teams go on and on and on. There's always going to be goals as you go back to the table and you look at your data and you think about what can we work on and how can parents be assisting with some of the things that people want to do.
Okay.
I was going to also mention parent stakeholders. I think I take that point that it's really important for internal teams to develop trusting internal team dynamic. And it's vulnerable work to be very self-reflective in that way.
Right.
So opening up to a lot of stakeholders can hamper that. But also just where is the point, right? Where that self-reflection is also opened up to additional stakeholders. And so, for example, especially when assessing that relationship, that school to family relationship, I think it's great to be self-reflective, but those self-reflections may be different than the external perception of the school to family relationship, and that wherever those perceptions intersect or diverge is really important for the larger school climate. And so I'm just curious where that and if it's still being worked out. That's a fair point too, but where are those opportunities for those two perspectives to kind of interact with one another?
I think that individual schools may be doing different things, but that's something that actually I'm working on this summer in terms of trying to define a more consistent way that people can connect with the school climate team, and that work can be communicated, at least for people to know what's going on.
And I think that also ties into, I was really excited to see that, so many seed cohorts next year, but also that parent seed is going to be an opportunity. Parents for our children are their first and most influential teachers, and so it's really wonderful that we as a school culture are shifting, but to include other stakeholders in that shift and giving them access is really exciting, and I think going to make a big impact.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
Anybody else? I had one quick question about the DELT and the parent advisory group, parent and community partners. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how many, how parents and community partners were selected for that advisory? Is that the external advisory group? Or
Yeah.
Is that? Oh, that's the
Yeah.
That's the
you're
one
on,
that I'm on.
You're on there.
oh,
You know that thing you went to?
but we didn't meet with the Delt.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
Wait, say that?
Oops, mistake.
Oh, okay. Okay, then I guess.
Don't look at that
You may
line.
in the future. No.
Don't look at that line.
Erased.
We'll edit it, right.
All right.
Sorry.
So is the whole child council now gone, like,
Whole Child Council has melted
They're
in.
now in the Delt.
they are, but it's not.
Yes, they're in there now.
Whole child.
The Delta has 38 people in it. It's a big group, 38.
But it's actually, the merger is an important one, because the other piece is we're doing so many things that are really important, and when there's work that's overlapping, how can we bring people together? And we want to be sensitive to initiative fatigue. We want to be sensitive to that while we move forward on what are high priority items.
I mean, I think it's a good move, I'm just curious. It's certainly responsive to a lot of our comments about alignment.
Yeah.
All right, Beatrice.
All right, thriving workforce. So for this third quarter, I had the pleasure of working with Corey Wallace and our principals, who were very open and eager to do this work. And we focused on starting to take a look at our hiring practices, really. So some of the initial work that we've done with our principals, we've developed some questions that have an equity focus to them. We presented them to our principals, we had them review them, kind of wordsmith, do these make sense for us, do they not make sense for us? Then they sorted them into questions that would be more appropriate for screening questions and questions that are more appropriate for an interview. And then we took it a step further where they would actually develop, what they're listening for from the candidates. So this way we would have a developed group of questions as well as common expectations of what we expect in terms of what we would like our candidates to, the kind of information we'd like them to be providing in their questions. And we then took it a step further where, at least for this year, we are requiring one specific question that will be used for every single screening and one specific question that will be used for every single interview. Recognizing that as we continue to go through this process, we'll have to review and make some revisions along the way, but thought that this would be a good starting point. And then principals and their hiring teams will have an opportunity to add additional questions from the list as well, but then also incorporate the questions that they need to that are more specific to whatever the position is that they're hiring for. So we have to allow for that flexibility. We are meeting with the principals again in just a couple weeks to take a little bit of a closer look on how they're developing their school-based interview teams and who they are bringing to the table, and then some work that they should try and do with their interview committee before they actually start the interview process with the candidates. So I think we are at a really great starting point. We have more work to do, but what I can say is that everyone is very excited about this work, which is very positive. There's been no resistance. Everyone really understands the focus that we have. So that's been very positive. In terms of the other 2 points, or the aspects that were not met this third quarter, you're all very much aware of what we just went through with our referendum and our reductions, so we did not spend the money to go to job fairs when in fact we didn't really know if we were going to have any positions to hire for. And then the other piece is in terms of looking at the employee retention, it didn't really make sense to do it in the third quarter because we have many resignations and retirings happening in June. And so once we kind of go through the summer months, we can get that data and then report out on it. It makes more sense to do it at that time of the year.
I want to make a comment just as a user of the tool that Beatrice and Corey have been working on. I think all of us around the table are involved in simultaneous searches as we speak right now. And the tool itself, so when you're doing lots of things in different positions, to actually have not only the questions and not only the questions and probes around equity, but the look-fors. And the look-fors are really interesting because it's just a way to nudge the hiring manager to pay attention from a lens this way and a lens this way and a lens this way. And it's just been really helpful in the multiple searches that I've been involved
Other questions? Sorry. Okay, one question. So I understand why we didn't do recruiting this year, but can we talk a little bit in terms about, or do we have plans in terms of when we do go about recruiting, how we're going to try to recruit a more diverse pool of candidates?
Sure. So one of the things we started to do this year was to bring on a group called our District 65 Ambassadors, which was intentional in trying to have folks who are right here with District 65 use their professional organizations, faith organizations, Greek organizations, to help network and promote our vacancies. We'd like to expand that, but again, this year was the first time that we pulled it together, and we are just now within the last few weeks where we've actually posted positions, because prior to that we weren't able to. So we're going to build that out a little more, and then also just look at if there are some sites or organizations, and depending on whether there's a fee associated with them or not, but definitely try and expand to some more like diverse groups and organizations in terms of job boards or universities and things like that. So those are just some initial thoughts.
How are these kind of cohorts or lists being developed in terms of where we pull for ambassadors, or who we connect with, organizations that we're connecting with, places that we're posting, you know, like how are we generating these lists of information?
So initially for the ambassadors, it was, I sent it out to principals and some other more so administrators and a few other folks who are not administrators, but because of the roles that they play within the district, it seemed to make sense. And it was a voluntary, like, would you be interested? And we have 11 right now, and of the 11, I would say it is a very diverse group in terms of how people would self-identify. There are at least 7 people of color. They vary from those who are working with the elementary schools or the middle schools, some with special ed background specifically. So it is a range, and in terms of the organizations that they are affiliated with. So that's a good first step, but definitely something to build on. In terms of where the postings are right now, when it gets posted on our website, it gets shot out to multiple job boards. We also have a contract with Education Week so that we can have them do some special banner postings and electronic postings for us as well, so that it's national, not just local. And then, as I mentioned before, looking to see what other job boards that could maybe pull from a more diverse group is what we're looking at as well.
Thank you. If there isn't anything else, Maria, were you going to do family and community engagement, or Joyce, or who's?
Earlier you were going to do it, but that's fine. But it's late.
That's
we're just going to start pointing to people.
Before Joyce made a
Stacy's
mistake.
up. Lindsay's doing it. Okay, so since this is not being televised, you Smallies can't get mad at me if I misrepresent this, but we have talked about it. So
It is.
It is.
Sorry.
You are telling us.
You are televised.
great.
That's right.
Hi, Smallies. I hope I do a good job representing your work. All right. So we did during, I think it was during report card or spring conferences, the RED department worked in collaboration with Ismailis and the middle schools to host some workshop opportunities for parents on how to use the SysK-12 system. So they were able to get some tutorial walking through the portal and assistance making changes actually to their data at that time if they needed it. So that's in her parent education opportunity bucket of work. The curriculum maps that were developed earlier this year or late last year are in the process of being formatted into versions that include a little more information and a more parent-friendly view to make them more accessible and understandable for parents to understand where their student is at and how they can support their work at home. A big focus of the work has been to expand the parent education classes this past year. So in the past, we've offered a computer basics class, and that has been expanded to include an advanced computer class that's in partnership with the Evanston Public Library. We've also expanded our offerings for ESL parent classes and are continuing the Parents as Educational Partners classes. East Mollis has also made presentations and participated with the PTA Council on family and community engagement with an equity lens, and that was a well-received event, and individual schools, I think she notes Warrington and Willard, have also had additional training for their school-specific PTAs. So she's trying to continue to make those opportunities available to the PTA. The Evanston Cradle to Career, we have district staff serving in leadership roles on numerous committees there, and some of the work that the committee that East Mollis has been participating in has been called out here in terms of, where's the one she's got? A trauma initiative, sorry, that's the last bullet, I wasn't quite ready to do this, designed to raise awareness on mental health in communities of color. And then we did a parent-led summer event last summer, and they're currently in the works for doing another one in participation or in partnership with students from ETHS. Anything else to add to that, Joyce? Thanks, guys. Excellent.
And again, it's worthwhile to underscore this is third quarter because we reported back on the second quarter when Ismailis and Corey Wallace convened the African American Parent Advisory Group and the Hispanic Parent Advisory Group together, and they've got plans to work both independently and together with those groups as we move forward. But that was a second quarter, I think, piece.
Yeah, and I will say that this bucket of work is one where if there's any way in which I would say East Mollis' work deviates from the original plan, it's just that she's doing more and more. So she has really expanded her focus, especially as the equity work has grown. So she's really just gone above and beyond what was laid out in the initial best laid plan as needs arise and people are interested in participating in things. She's making it happen on a lot of fronts through a lot of partnerships, and she's really, I think, done an incredible job with this work.
East Mollis co-facilitates the seed groups with Corey Wallace that we have. She was also very involved when we brought the students to the SOAR conference so that we could give some of our middle school students, a feel of what SOAR is like. So she's been very helpful in doing that.
Do we have questions that we want Maria to channel Ismailis to answer?
Of course now. You can direct your questions to Joyce.
Great. Very unfairly, would love to know a little bit more about the community participation in the engagement activities, to know how the engagement is actually working.
But, I'm familiar with some of the events that they had. The Latino event, there was a big turnout at that one when we had that earlier in the year. I don't know, Maria, do you know about the other ones?
We can get
Not actual data. I know that as she reports back on them, she's telling me that they're well received and well attended.
It seems like it's been
and
very
that's why we're
effective.
doing more. So like expanding the computer classes and trying to get more slots for the ESL classes.
Right.
So it seems like we're meeting a bigger demand with more offerings. So.
We've had, she does some events with Family Focus over, at Foster Center. She's also done some work in engaging with JC Renteria, who's our family engagement person in 3 to 5, as well as with our home visitors in terms of joint events that they've talked about doing.
She also did Leadership Evanston last year as a member of the cohort, and then this year has been one of the main speakers in going and talking about the equity agenda and her own equity journey, and it's been really quite powerful.
Well, I guess we know why she isn't here to
Yeah, we're happy that she's
She's
resting.
Resting or somewhere else doing something amazing. So. Did you have a question?
Sure. So I use SISC-12, which is great. I mean, I just popped it up right now just to check on my middle schooler, and middle school actually does a really good job, at least Shoot does, in entering grades and all that good stuff, attendance. Now, for my little guys, I got a third grader and a fifth grader. No, wait, third. No, sorry, fourth, second grader.
You're on TV, remember that,
I know, right? My wife's gonna kill me. She watches it. Yeah. So, you know, what is the protocol in regards for teachers for using SISC-12 to input grades and all this other information? Again, looking at my kids and their DAWS information, all I see is like a library grade, right? So, in regards to how that's rolled out.
Short answer is that there are no specific expectations for the use of that system at this time. I know that, just looking to my left, Stacy's going to be kicking off a group to look at updating and revising our report cards, and that might be part of the work that they undertake as well. I agree with you. And I would say that all of our middle schools, Shoot, Nichols, and Haven, do an excellent job of using the email communication, using SISK-12 to communicate with parents. I think that's a practice that we can build upon. I think it's a strength in our middle schools for sure.
I'm unfortunately going to bebop back to the question that Lindsay had, so sorry if I'm taking anyone off track of an idea that Sergio's question prompted. So I think it would be wonderful if at some point we could get more information about the family programs in terms of the specific numbers of reach, and then whether it's anecdotal or quantitative feedback about how folks are, how many people are actually engaging and completing the programs, and what's the feedback in terms of how it's impacting the relationship with our district, but also just families' lived experience. So I would love to hear more about that at some point. And
that is something we do refine the strategy indicator scorecard every year to take a look at what data we have what metrics we have data for, where we could add additional data to that. So I think something like participation in that might be something we can see what's gathered or what we have access to, and if that's a good place to share that.
Okay. I had another question, but I forgot it at the moment, so I'm going to look back at my notes while someone else asks their question.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased to see that there's a trauma initiative that's being discussed, and I mean that is something that is it's just great. In regards to who you're engaging, I mean I'd suggest in Illinois Children's Mental Health Partnership would be a good resource. I know they have a website out, and that's an amalgamation. It was a statewide effort where they're bringing in folks, community organizations, agencies that work on mental health, and has a child focus. So we're very happy to hear that's part of our conversation when we talk about equity and looking at trauma as a piece to address.
Did you remember your question?
I do, yeah. My other point was I appreciated the opportunity to participate in the Black and Latino Parent Advisory Group, and I look forward to hearing about what the next steps are. That's something I'd love to hear more specifics from too, in terms of outcomes. I mean, as a participant, of course, I'll be familiar, but I think it'll be useful for us as a board to hear about the feedback from that and whatever next steps come out of it. So yeah, I look forward to how we can incorporate some information from those groups as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And then, I don't know if we have anything more on financial sustainability than what we discussed earlier.
I think, I mean, the essentials are before you in here, both recognizing the passage of the referendum. We stand tall on the resolution that you passed to move forward, and I think that I've asked the finance staff to just keep bringing that resolution back to us, just to, like it's on your bulletin board, as I said earlier. I think we have to stand true to that. We are working right now, along with everything else that the team is doing. We're building budget frameworks for next year, and we're working on a hybrid of our zero-based budgeting programming. As it says at the end, I mean, we might end this where we started the evening, which is on not only the state threats, but all the uncertainties that are occurring in our environment. We're poised to address them right now, and we're poised as a broader community of educators, public educators across the state to address them, but we don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that, unfortunately, when several of us were at a city schools committee last week, and we talked about the uncertainties at the state and federal level as it impacts all of the work that we do to care about the citizens of Evanston. And so we're going to be facing that, and that's all part of our financial sustainability, the avenues that we're on towards financial sustainability.
I will assume there's no public comment on this or anything else.
May I say just one thing? Thank you, and it's the hour's late, and we spent a lot of time on this, but thank you for spending the amount of time on this. We take this very seriously. We take seriously how we judge our work. We want to put forward what we're doing. The questions are really helpful. It helps us in thinking about what we do as we look at the strategic plan for the year to come and our action plans and where we have to focus. So I just want to thank each of the board members for your focus on what we presented and your comments. It really helps us.
Thank you to y'all. Yeah, thank you. The only FYI, the board committee and school liaison appointments. I don't know. I think we updated the school liaison. It's on the, so, Sergio, I'm off of shoot. Sorry about that. And then I actually I forgot that I had talked to Joey Nanya. They wanted to switch the policy and finance committee. I don't know if it's too late since we had a finance committee meeting or what we do. But maybe that's something we can discuss. Can we switch them? Okay. Is that cool? Okay. With no further business to come before the board, I adjourn this meeting at 9:50 p.m.